This is the Lutheran Education Podcast, a bi weekly podcast where we explore issues, trends, and events surrounding Christian education with your hosts, Richard Schumacher, Senior Director of Operations at LSEM, and Dr. Tracy Salgado, Director of Special Education at LSEM.
Welcome to the Lutheran Education Podcast, brought to you by Lutheran Special Education Ministries. I am your host. My name is Richard Schumacher. I am the Senior Director of Operations for LSEM. And today we are excited to have a new person, not only to the podcast, but a new person to LSEM. Her name is Mindy English. Mindy is LSEM's new Director of Programs and Services at LSEM. She's got a long history with the ministry as well, so she's new but not new at the same time. But we're really excited to have her working with us and joining us today. Mindy, hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So, why don't we start, Mindy, with tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, your path through Lutheran education over the course of your career, and what brings you here to LSEM today.
Well, my name is Mindy English, and I've been in education for 30 some years. I actually grew up in the Lutheran schools. I was from Fort Wayne, Indiana. So I went to Concordia Lutheran Grade School and Concordia Lutheran High School. Um, I never really thought I was going to be a teacher, nor did I think I was going to be a Lutheran educator. Went on to Purdue University because I didn't want to be a name anymore. I wanted to be a number. Being 10 and 12 years younger than my brother and sister, and always kind of being compared to that. And just cousins and stuff. I was like, no, yeah, I want it big. I want to be my own person. Um, but God has a way of bringing you back. And so when I was in Fort Wayne and moved back to Fort Wayne after I got married, I was in the public schools and was told about a position at our grade school where my kids were at to be the preschool teacher. And it wasn't full time, and I needed full time. And so the principal, Bob Boyd, at that time said, I think you should be with Lutheran Special Ed Ministries and interview there. They're going to have some openings around. So I was like, well, we'll see. And started doing devotions. And yep, God was like, it's a fork in the road, say yes. And that was the fork. So I went on an interview and then I started teaching at Holy Cross Lutheran there as their resource room teacher. And I was there for 12 years. And I think I was with LSEM most of that time. There were some little things, hiccups that happened, um, just on the school end, it just things that happened. And then went over to Concordia Lutheran to be their resource room teacher. And um, through that, we decided to get back into LSEM. So then I was teaching there. And then just God kind of stepped in again and said, you need a break. And I was teaching at Concordia for 4 years as a kindergarten teacher. But in that time, we moved from Fort Wayne and moved to Fremont, so Indiana, which was about an hour away. So I was traveling back and forth every day and decided it was time not to do that anymore. And had stayed in contact with LSEM, and here we are. Now I am doing this for the first time. I'm not in a classroom for in 30 some years. So kind of crazy to think about.
Tremendous irony in the fact that you recognized that an hour-long commute was too much, but now you're off to Indianapolis, you're off to Texas, you're up in Michigan. So, so really saving a lot of time in the car on this job change.
Yeah, that was a little different. Yeah.
But it's not every day, so I suppose
Right.
that's the caveat. So I
And not always at 5 in the morning. So,
Oh yes, that
yeah.
5 in the morning is early. And again, for all those educators that get up and do that every day, God bless you for your dedication with that. So a
Yes.
couple of questions based on just on your biography there. You attended Concordia Lutheran as a student
Hmm.
and then ended up coming back as a teacher.
Yes.
Is that weird?
It was a little. Um, Two teachers were still there when I was a student, and one was like my first grade teacher, my handwriting teacher. And in all the time I worked with her, I never called her by her first name. She was still Mrs. Geishan to me. Yeah, I just couldn't. She'd be like, you can, and she even taught my children. Like, she had both my sons, and she would be like, you can call me Leanne. I was like, no, I can't. No, 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 no. So, we have a lot of long timers that stay at Concordia. So, it in the beginning it was kind of weird, but I had been like on the school board and a parent there for a while, so it wasn't as weird as if I would have started right out there,
Sure.
you know.
Yeah, I wouldn't. When I graduated from Concordia Ann Arbor back in the 90s, I was a December grad, so I went back home for a semester until I was able to get a call. And I was doing a lot of subbing at Valley Lutheran in Saginaw, my alma mater. And that was kind of weird too, again. But it
Hmm.
was that really short duration because I had just graduated in '89. I'm there, in '93, doing this subbing. And so a lot of the teachers are still there. And it there was at least once that I recall having a prep hour, sitting in the teachers' lounge and having a teacher walk in and do a double take as to why is Schumacher in here? And they, oh yeah, that's right. He's not a student anymore. So
Yeah.
that would have been weirder, certainly when you were
Hmm.
younger, as far as that's concerned.
Yeah.
Then the other question is, you've kind of gone back and forth between early childhood and special education. And again,
Mhm.
trained on both of those areas of education over the course of time. Uh, for teachers out there who are doing one or the other, or possibly both,
Hmm.
what were the advantages, uh, or even some disadvantages, but what were the advantages of being trained in both of those areas? As an early childhood educator, you're already so geared on emerging literacy and getting the students started off with a proper foundation for their reading and their math, and then to be working with students who really need that because there's a learning disability or some other struggle that they're facing. How did those two pair together? Did you find advantages to that, or any conflicts with that?
I think it really helped me because both when I started at Holy Cross and when I started at Concordia, um, and at the time they were the two largest programs in Fort Wayne, and I grew them quite a lot. But I think for me it was an advantage because when I came into those programs, I was very top heavy. I had a lot of middle schoolers, a lot of stuff I was seeing. And I was like, this has got to change. We've got to start hitting these kids a lot younger. And so I think with my early childhood training, I was able to develop early intervention programs in those. And I was there long enough to start seeing that, you know, by the time I left both programs, I was not top heavy. The kids we saw in the middle school then were children who had an ISP, or an EP, as we call them at LSEM. They they were qualified. They were just that. Instead of seeing all these kids that kind of struggled, because we started that early intervention, we were able to stop some of that struggle. So I was much more bottom heavy, just doing early intervention and, hitting those skills to help them read and write and even do math skills, to help that. And so I think that really helped me because I was able to kind of start fixing those programs so that we weren't so top heavy and seeing 15, 20 kids in the eighth grade because they still struggled in reading, but didn't qualify enough for a education plan.
So how does one set about changing the thrust of a program in a school from being top heavy or again focused more on older students and flipping it down more toward the early childhood, early elementary grade levels? What are those processes?
Yeah, it's not an easy one because it's a lot of changing teachers' perspectives on the role of special ed. There was a lot of well, you need to help them do this homework. And I'm like, that's a tutor's job. I'm a teacher. So when they come to my room, unless we have time set up for that, I'm finding out what skills they are missing to catch them up so that they can function in your classroom. Doing the homework that we know they can't do because they don't have the skills to do it, that's the tutor's job. And I've had too much training for that. So it was kind of changing that perspective first, and then saying, okay, really getting with the middle school teachers, like, well, how often do you like having all these kids that are struggling? What can we start doing differently? And then meeting with the principals and the younger teachers and being like, the lower grade teachers saying, okay, this is what we need to start now so that it's not so much. And it takes a couple years to get that going and getting that change. There were times I had to be very firm, like, nope, nope, that's not a good use of my time. I want to help the students and I want to help you teachers, but my priority is to get these children caught up and meeting them where they are at. So, you have to be kind of firm, but also being understanding and loving and just trying to constantly explain. Once we do this, it's going to make our lives a lot easier in the long run. So, Concordia was a little bit easier because they were looking for a change when I came and they knew they were missing that. So that one was a little bit easier because it was kind of more coming in and they're like, how do we do this? How do we start early intervention? It was also later, you know, um, the studies of early intervention were more prominent and coming out more. So they were kind of ready to start that. But that first one was a little bit difficult. So, but just being able to show those differences and what it can do. So,
We're talking with Mindy English, Director of Programs and Services for Lutheran Special Education Ministries today on the podcast. And I really was kind of little light went off for me when you were talking about that whole homework versus building skills role that a resource room teacher, especially an LSEM resource room teacher, has. Uh, many years ago, when I was in the classroom, I was a seventh and eighth grade teacher, and we had an LSEM program. Uh, and I can say that, from my perspective, again, being a younger teacher and fairly new and untrained on the whole special ed because I was secondary trained.
hmm
So lots of content area information, not a lot of special education types of or exceptionalities types of training at that time for me.
hmm
So homework help was the big caveat for me because that's what I knew. That's what I struggled with. And skill building, I mean, by the time they reach seventh grade, I'm living in this fallacy that well, they should all know how to read by now. Some
hmm
better than others, but well enough to be able to do what I'm needing to do without a whole lot of changing of my approach or modifying what I'm doing there. Uh, do you think that, again, elementary teachers, early childhood teachers are perhaps a little more sensitive to that because that's just what they're working with on a day to day? I mean, when you're a first grade teacher and you're teaching kids how to read, a kindergarten teacher teaching kids
hmm
how to read, you're assessing those things and identifying them. Where I, as a seventh grade teacher, hey, we're doing social studies, get out your social studies book and read, you know, I just don't have that assessment. So so
hmm
is that kind of the thrust as to why you see a lot of that focus on, well, just help them get their homework done so the kid's happy and the parents happy and we can all move
hmm
on?
Yes, I think so. And so many times it's harder, for a middle school teacher to make those accommodations um than because sometimes it's a lot more that you have to do. And so it can be a lot harder to make those accommodations and modifications that a child might need in their classroom. Um, and because they're so much more independent, so they're like, I'm not used to having to help a kid like this and that, uh, also that's why I'm not in elementary. I don't want to do that kind of
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah,
you know.
because again, as
Hmm.
a teacher, and I don't want to put words into your mouth or thoughts into your head, but as a teacher going into early childhood, I'm going to assume when someone asks you, well, why do you want to teach and why do you want to teach that grade level? One of the answers you were probably giving was, I want to teach kids how to read.
Yes.
I want
Mhm.
to see that light bulb go on with,
Yep.
and that's great. Middle schooler teachers, high school teachers, I want to teach chemistry. I,
Right.
I want to
Hmm.
see let kids have the joy of science that I have. That has nothing to do with I mean, there is a definite expectation that a set of skills are going to be there. And a lot of teachers, I mean, we've done a better job, I think, in recent years of recognizing this
Hmm.
and equipping our younger teachers with that. But by and large, I'm just here to teach science. I'm just here to teach social studies. I'm not here to teach them how to read. That's someone else's job. They should have done that. I mean,
Right.
that disconnect is real, and I think drives a lot of the struggle and angst that happens when we see those
Hmm.
things.
Yeah. Uh, Totally. And, they're just like, what? So, trying to work with teachers too to make things more hands-on and getting them like, well, yeah, they may not be able to read that, but with technology, we can make that so much more accessible. I mean, I remember starting out reading social studies chapters into a tape recorder every night so that the child would have something to do, and be able to listen to it and, buying them headphones, um, and having, do that. And then all of a sudden they would start coming with CDs, and it was like, oh my gosh, yes, here's a CD, but then we'd have to burn those so that each student could have what, so,
Mhm.
now that it's just kind of online and you can give them things, that makes it a lot easier. But then just sitting with the teachers, like, well, they don't always have to do like, I really try to talk with the teachers and teach them like, well, what is your goal for the assignment? Is it practice? Is it to really, learn something more about, if it's science about the cells? Or is it, that they can read it or that they can write you a paragraph on it? And when they're like, well, I really need them to know about the cells and how it moves. And okay, so can we, instead of them doing this worksheet or having to read this paragraph and write you a paragraph on it, can they make a design of it to show you, and kind of working. So I think I always approached it first was like, well, what is your goal? And I always think of that like with memory work in our Lutheran schools, you know, we often say, well, the goal is that they learn to memorize because that's so good for them. It is good. But if we already know that this child has been tested and they cannot memorize, what is our real goal of memory? Our real goal is so that they have the Word of God in their hearts and that they can use that as they go forward in life. They have something to look back on and, in times of trouble or in joys and celebration and marriage, and that they know where to go and find that word to help them get through. So let's teach a kid that can't memorize. Let's teach them how to find it in the Bible and show you that they can find it. And, yeah, show them how to use their Bible app and, what keywords can you type in to find that verse? Can you pull it up for me and show me that you've practiced that? Sometimes it'd be like, let's practice reading it. But if reading was a problem too, we need to know where to find it. Do you know how to play that for me? And so that you will be able to do that later in life, because that's the real goal of memory, you know.
Yes.
So,
So when we were kids and our teachers all told us we had to learn our multiplication tables because it's not like you're going to be carrying a calculator around with you everywhere you go. Um, well,
yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
but and I agree, having the word of God imprinted on your heart is valuable, not because at a moment's notice you can rattle off a Bible verse,
Right.
like you're a tape recorder, but because you understand the premise of what God is telling you in that moment and it can apply
Hmm.
it to that moment. Um,
Hmm.
so again, when you're getting upset, you can pull up the Bible, be anxious in nothing, all those
Yeah.
sorts of things, if you're feeling guilty over sin, well, for all of sin and fall short of the glory of God, you can use those verses to help you.
Hmm.
But the practice of the rote memorization, and again, there's nothing wrong with do you know how to do a Google search to say Bible verses about being anxious?
Right.
That's great too. I mean, again, we've got
Hmm.
that tool there. So being able to teach that, and it's not taking away from the validity or the power of Scripture. In fact, it's enhancing it because
Hmm.
it's eliminating that deficiency.
Right. So I always feel like that's a good way to start approaching it, especially with our Lutheran teachers, because every home teacher is in charge of their memory,
Yeah.
so homeroom teacher. So always just kind of finding that. And then it's like starts getting them to start thinking about things differently. And, well, that's just training and helping them. I always tried, and it's really hard, never to be like, well, here's some ideas, go for it, and then leave. I'd be like, let me get you started. Let's work through this together. I'll start working on this in my classroom with them. Let's get this going. And then, as they get more comfortable, I remember our science teacher had a really hard time, but by the end of our second year, he was like, okay, so for this kid, I've got this project lined up for that, and I've got this one, and look, I already found this, and because they can start thinking that and going, oh, it's not that hard
Yeah.
once we start it. But you have to learn how to do it. And if you're not trained in it, and like it wasn't always easy for me either because I'd be like, I didn't go in to know how to teach social studies at the eighth grade level, but now I know. And so then I could start helping find those things to do.
And I think another thing that I hear you saying that really resonates with me is the idea of we want the students to be able to excel at things that allows them to feel like they've accomplished something, like they're contributing something, and not put them in a position where the learning disability that they have is going to make them feel even less than.
Right.
And I'm gonna get my soapbox for just a second here. And I'll preface this for anyone listening by saying, if you disagree with me and you want to make complaints, send them to my email address. This is Richard Schumacher's opinion. So take that for what it's worth. So send me your email complaints. I probably won't read them, but look forward to giving them a fair shot in the inbox or the outbox, depending. As a middle school teacher, confirmation was always a part of the mix that we had when it came to putting our schedule together, pastors coming in and doing all of those things. And there's lots of different ways that pastors will try to connect the students with what we're doing in the church to give them that buy-in, that sense of connectivity. And a lot of times that becomes the volunteer corps to help with worship services. So
Hmm.
acolytes and junior ushers and people assisting with, the soundboard or the PowerPoint slides. And this is where I'm headed. PowerPoint slides. Everybody has to sign up to do a certain number of days, and oftentimes the PowerPoint media stuff becomes a part of it.
Hmm.
So for any student, when I was ever teaching this and have to go in there and kind of help train them on these things, I would always give this advice to the kids. When you're back here doing this, I want you to recite every verse that you're supposed to. So when Pastor reads his responsive reading, you need to read yours. If we're singing the song, sing the song. I know you're in the booth. I know you might feel weird about it, but that does two things. One, you are still worshiping. You're still
Hmm.
actively a part of the worship service. And two, you're not gonna forget to change the slide if you're singing it. If you don't change the slide, I know you're not singing it. But now you give that sort of responsibility to a student who has an attention deficit,
Hmm.
and we're all shocked, surprised, turning around in our seats and growing very grouchy that the slides aren't on time because we gave a student who has a legitimate deficit in that area the responsibility of doing this for a couple of hundred people sitting in the sanctuary. Make that make sense to me because it doesn't.
No, yeah. And like in that situation, you have to look like, okay, maybe you can help make the slides, but maybe you don't have to be there on Sunday sitting up there, or you have a partner with you that, takes turns or is there to kind of tap you or, making that, hey, we're coming up next, we got to, because they're not going to be able to focus in on that. And they may have, depending on some of their stuff, they can't read along. So
Mhm.
they're not knowing that we just finished that because or they're like still 10 lines behind trying to catch up to do that. And they're not there yet. So, having, someone there to sit with them to do that as well.
Yeah.
Is,
Because the acolyting job,
mhm.
that's not something that's going to have such an impact from the attention side.
Yeah.
Junior ushering, if you're up there ushering, there's usually another usher right there kind of
Yeah.
walking through. And so
Hmm.
you've got other positions that are naturally better suited for this as a part of that. Now
Right.
I get it. The computers are cool and that's the
Yeah.
fun one, etc. In the minds of some. I don't know, maybe not anymore because computers do so many other really top of the line cool things, and hitting the enter button at the
Yeah.
end of each hymn is a little less than. But again, it's taking that step back and looking at it in terms of what makes the most sense for the student based on his or her needs, and
Hmm.
how can we position and place them in the place that is going to give them the greatest opportunity for success, not failure.
Right. Exactly.
All right.
So for attention deficit, like let him usher more because he gets to walk, or even going up and helping with some other thing, set up the altar, there's so many other things we could have them doing that would still teach them and get them into the church, but maybe running the PowerPoint screen is not the way to go.
All right. And again, I will step down off of my soapbox. We'll do the offering at this point and maybe get some help from some of those students to
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
assist with that. Um, anyway, before I get in any more trouble and to give everyone a chance to get my email address down for their complaints, let's take a break. We'll step away for just a second. We'll return back in a few minutes, continue our conversation with Mindy English on Lutheran Education Podcast, brought to you by Lutheran Special Education Ministries.
Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear today, please consider sharing our podcast with friends and colleagues in the industry. Again, thank you for listening to the Lutheran Education Podcast.
Welcome back to the Lutheran Education Podcast, brought to you by Lutheran Special Education Ministries. Again, today we are joined by the Director of Programs and Services, newly crowned Director of Programs and Services at LSEM, Mindy English. Mindy, Stacy McGee, our President and CEO, is a well-known, unapologetic University of Michigan fan. I myself,
Yeah,
like the maize and blue just a touch, a
a
little
bit.
bit,
Yeah,
a bit, as
just a
I'm
bit.
sitting in my office today, surrounded by all sorts of maize and blue, this, that, and the other.
Ugly blue and gold. Yeah, yeah.
And and you went to Purdue.
I did. Boiler up.
Oh, boiler up. So,
Yeah.
two questions. When people say don't, how does that make you feel? And what's it feel like to be rooting for like the 17th best team in the Big Ten?
Well, growing up Lutheran and being at a Lutheran high school in a big public school city, you're kind of used to cheering for those who may not do all that well, especially in football. So, um, the Purdue don't, it's like, oh, whatever, ugh, really, that's just not even that clever. So it's just like that's all I can come up with. Okay. Or they'll do me like Purdue down instead of, because of
Instead
boiler.
of boiler up?
Yeah, so um, you know, but what I say about that, especially living in Indiana, because most IU people are, IU basketball totally, but they go to Notre Dame for football or, like someone else for football. Whereas Purdue fans are Purdue fans. Like we root for our team no matter what. We don't like, oh, well, we'll like IU now for that or Notre Dame for football. No, we're like Purdue fans. So we're very faithful and we understand we have ups and downs and we kind of live for basketball.
And I will give you your flowers on this one. Kyle Barlow is a Concordia Ann Arbor graduate who was in the School of Education program when I was there. He
Hmm.
is now an assistant men's basketball coach for Ohio University.
Hmm.
He was a grad assistant for the University of Michigan when they went to I think he was there for the run to the championship game, the Trey Burke shot and all that sort of stuff from back in the day. Anyway, he I had a chance to talk with him about some of his experiences, and he said Mackey Arena, going into Mackey to coach, was the loudest environment he had ever been in.
Hmm.
He said his ears were ringing hours later
Yeah.
from having been in the arena there for a couple of hours. So he was very impressed with the passion that Purdue has, which is good because if you don't have results, you might as well have passion. But anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
I digress. I apologize. Back on topic. Again, we're talking a lot about just how that special education relationship works as a resource room teacher in a building. Talked about how homework and is not the key critical thing. Is more of the building skills and making those accommodations that are necessary. A lot of the stuff that we talked about seems to me like the principal in the building plays a huge role in making all of that happen.
Hmm.
And so I was just curious, but in your experience over the course of your career, how have your administrators been a positive or possibly a negative, uh, played a positive negative role in the success of your program and the success of the teachers buying into what you're trying to do?
Yeah, the principal is has a big role in that because, if they're not on your side and the teachers go in and start complaining, then they're kind of like, well, no, the teachers don't like that. You can't do that, and well, it's making it harder for the teachers. And when you're like, but I'm not really worried about the teachers, I'm worried about the student, and that's kind of our job. And
Mhm.
so, having that relationship, um, I think as a special educator, and especially if you're new and starting out, building that relationship with that principal first, is really important, and explaining what you want. I honestly think one of my hardest ones is probably my principal that actually was a special educator before she became principal.
Oh, really?
And it was kind of our hearts because we didn't see eye to eye on how it should be done. And she came very much from the public school
Okay.
view. And that was probably our biggest thing. And I was like, but we're in the Lutheran school. Like, we can do
Yeah.
things differently. We don't have to do that. I can start seeing these children right away and helping them. And, she wanted to very much go the public school, small step, small step. They have to qualify. And I was like, nope, it's just different here. So that was probably my hardest one. And just having to teach her how, because it wasn't having to teach her about the role of special ed, it was teaching her how it can be better in a Lutheran school and in a parochial school.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's a totally different thing and
it is.
should be a different
Yes.
thing. It's not like the Lutheran school is cutting a corner or cheapening the
Mhm.
experience. It's you're actually in a common sense way taking advantages that probably some of the public school teachers would, if you asked them deep down, like to do.
Yes, exactly. And I think also being that partner, um, like with the principal on when paperwork comes in on a child, can we actually do this? Because it is our ministry and we want to help. And sometimes we can do more, but there's sometimes we just don't have the help that child may need. And we have to be open and honest and understanding that. And having principals learn that they don't know how to read an IEP that comes in. And maybe taking on a kid like at my former school, we just really didn't have the ability to help someone that was EH. And he took one. He took a little guy like that. And yeah, and I came in when school was starting, like, it's in my mailbox and I'm looking like, what did you do? Like, we cannot handle this. And he's like, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. I was like, okay, we were not fine. So, learning that, teaching them like, let me go through it too, or let your special educator go through it too, because they're going to be able to read into those wordings and what people are saying with a different understanding than maybe just the average principal or gen ed teacher, because we kind of know how we have to write things. Um,
Yeah, and
so,
it's not that the resource room teacher is in any way trying to tell the school who they should or shouldn't
mhm,
enroll. The analogy that I always use, and it's probably a bad one, is you go to Target or to some other grocery store shopping store, and there aren't prices on a lot of the stuff nowadays because it's all digitized. But at the
mhm,
end of the aisle, there's that little device where you scan it and it'll tell you what the price is. So if you're not sure, you can go down there and get that information.
mhm.
The resource room teacher is that scanner.
Yes.
It's designed to tell you
Mhm,
this is what it's going to cost. Not in terms of dollars and cents per se, but this is the amount of time the student's going to need. These are the
mhm,
resources that the student's going to need to be successful. This is how many minutes or hours per day the student's going to need to be in a set. They're the ones that are going to tell the principal, this is what it's going to take to be successful to educate this child. And then with that information, the principal and the school then makes the decision to say,
right.
yep, we're going to get behind the student and do
Mhm.
this, and we're going to make this happen, or this is beyond what we're able to do, or the needs, we just don't have the
Yeah.
resources to do it. Better to have those conversations, like you said, in the spring or the summer before
Mhm.
they're enrolled. Once they're enrolled, then
It's
those
very difficult.
conversations are all very difficult and awkward and
Yes.
potentially hurtful.
Yeah. And then also being able to bring the parents in. Like, we've had some students where I'm like, okay, we can do this much, but you know, the child needs way more than that. But what is your goal, parents, for your child to be here? Are you okay with us only being able to
Yeah.
do this, this, and this while they still need A, B, and C too? And sometimes they're like, yes, because I want them safe. I want them to get a Christian education. That is more important to
Yeah.
me, to have friends and family, especially if you've taken someone really young and as they're growing, it's getting harder and harder to meet their needs and
Yeah.
we're struggling. Having that open and honest conversation with the parents so that as a school you're on the same page. And if we can't be on that same page, then let us help you find a place that will be or can get that help. And a lot of times the parents are more like, we want them here, they're safe, they're happy, they have friends here. And so we're willing to forego some of that. We understand they'll get more help um somewhere else, but we choose to get as much as we can here and we know they're safe, happy, and building lifetime friendships kind of thing. So,
Yeah, and there's no really wrong answer when it comes to either of those decisions because what I believe the role of the Christian school is at that point is to then be able to say, if you go the route of staying here and we know that there are deficiencies, let's identify what those deficiencies are. So then that way we as a school or other resources within the school can help to pick up some of those pieces.
right.
And if we can't, then the family has the ability to seek outside assistance, whether it's in the form of tutoring or maybe at home, mom and dad are able to do a few more things to help assist. And again, we can provide information, ideas on what sorts of things would be good in supporting that.
Mm-hmm.
Conversely, if going to another school setting is going to be ultimately best for the student academically as they develop, then what are the things that we're going to do on the relational side, the faith building side, all those
Mm-hmm.
other very important pieces that our churches and schools provide? But again, all of that can happen if the conversations are direct,
Mm-hmm.
upfront, honest,
Yep.
and couched in a desire to say, we want what's best for your family and what's best for your child.
Yes, exactly. And you just got to be that open up front. And it's when you're not, that's when the problems arise. When we try to coddle, or like we say, oh, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. And, then the child comes and they're like, that's not happening. You said you could do this. Well, we didn't understand it was that much. Or, or just, you got to just really be that this is what we can give. This is what, just had that last year as a kindergarten teacher. Our community schools are changing how they're doing speech. And I was like, this guy's speech needs it every week. And you're saying he's only going to get it twice a week. And then you're going to try to keep him in there for a half an hour, or it was like 40 minutes. I'm like, he has attention span of like a flea. So I was like, this is not good. This will not work. This will not meet his needs. And, right there talked with parents like, we can do so much, but I need you to really look at this, because if he was in a public school and I had our public school explain what it would have been like, speech would be like for him there, that's kind of really what he needs. Are you still willing to keep him here? What are your reasons, understanding? And parents chose my school, and for kind of the reasons we talked about was, he's loved here, he's cared for, we understand that. We'll start looking at outside services for him as well to build that up. But I wanted them to know, because I was like, oh, that's not his best placement. But if we're going to consider the other things, then yes, it is, because he was loved, and the kids had learned to understand him a lot better by the end of the year. And for him not having to start over with that, he used to cry every day, and now like maybe once a month he was crying because someone didn't understand him. So making that progress, and um and he had a lot of friends, so it was worth it. But I was like, they need to know, they need to understand that it could have been something different.
With teasing her, and again, you kind of caught that from the Purdue question a little bit ago. But it was teasing her because she went through that process that a lot of us teachers would go through when you're leaving the classroom, and the schedule of that to doing another position that has a different sort of a schedule. For those of you teachers out there, uh, how many of you, again, laugh at yourself if you are like this, but how many of you, even on a day when you just have a day off, are looking at the clock all day and saying, it's 11 o'clock. Right now, I would be finishing up math with my kids and moving into, you know,
Mhm.
so everything is just always so based on the school day schedule and life in general.
Mhm.
I tend to eat lunch at 11:30 a lot of days on the weekends, based on my wife's teaching schedule.
Mhm.
So all those different things that come into that. So, Mindy, what have
Yep.
you enjoyed most, and what have you found perhaps most challenging when it comes to making that transition from the everyday in a classroom schedule to who knows what I'm going to be end up doing today's schedule?
Um, well, I think the most enjoyable is I can pretty much go to the bathroom whenever I want
There we go.
to.
See, this is the sort of direct, honest, straightforward feedback that you only get from an early childhood slash special education teacher. That's
Oh,
awesome. This could be like one of the top three moments of the podcast.
that's, so true. You had to be scheduled, and like, if, yeah, so it's like, oh wow, I can. But I think too, the hardest has been, like, I feel like I should account for every moment of my day. And so, like, I feel like I should be, on until certain times, if I'm my husband's shaking his head at me, but like if I'm driving, even if I'm driving for LSEM, I feel like I should be like learning something. So I should be listening to a webinar. I should be, you know, and like every moment of my day should be doing something, and learning that may not always have to be happening. And if I'm driving for work, I'm driving for work. So it's okay to listen to music at times, or listen to my book. But I think that's been really hard, just to, it's so different, or being like, oh, I can just sit outside and work and I'm still working, whereas I don't have to, yeah, and filling it with children at all moments of the day is kind of, yeah, it's been it's been quite nice, but it's a lot different, you know.
And again, this has been your career. You've been doing this for a long time. It's
Hmm.
you can't just make that change and not have some sort of an impact to that. So I'll put you on the spot then.
Hmm.
Do you have a favorite educational book? Could be special ed, could be early childhood, could just be general pedagogy, anything. Just a go-to book that you thought was the most impactful for you as an educator that you would be willing to recommend to folks listening?
Um, I think when it comes to, my love is really early intervention and early reading and all that. And when I was trained in Orton Gillingham, that just changed everything for me
Mhm.
in teaching reading and like really getting to get my teachers learning in that. And then with all this science of reading that came out, and I was like, this is what we've been doing. We've been doing, and this big shift for it. But I honestly, this is one of the easiest ones, the shifting the balance for teachers that have never, are still learning about science of reading or how does it apply to the classroom. This is a really simple read. Um, and it explains it, and especially for those teachers that are still in balanced literacy and how do I change and how do I go to that? Um, this is a really good one. There's a K2, but there's like a 3 through 5 as well. And I think that is because it meets them where they're at,
Okay.
which we like as special educators. We want that. And I think this was really good because I was my last year of being in the resource, moving into kindergarten when I was doing this, but I was like, oh, this helps me so much on how to talk to a teacher about trying this when, they've been trained for so long that this is what you have to do. And we don't really want that. And it met them where that's. So I think that's a really good one if you're still in that where are you at kind of thing.
Okay, so
Um,
that's shifting the balance, and who are the authors?
oh, Jan Birkins and Carrie Yates.
Jan Birkins
Mm-hmm.
and Carrie Yates.
Yes,
Shifting the balance, okay?
yes. And you can find them like on Facebook and stuff. If you put in shifting the balance, they have a whole thing.
Got
And
it.
that was a really good one, I think.
Yep.
And then I know like a lot of our Lutheran schools are going into like frenzies or we did oh, what was it called? It'll come to me. Where teaching children that emotional growth and how to handle all their emotions and stuff. And those are really great programs. But I this summer really reading in the zones of regulation, a book, and their program I think is really good to go along with those and helping kids learn through that those emotions and how to understand what they're feeling and teaching them like, yes, I understand you're so upset right now, but let's really look at it. Is this something we need to be that upset about? Can we, put this in a different zone? And so I think that's been a really good one and been talking to a couple kindergarten classes that I'm working with about using that and they're finding that it fits right in with that other curriculum that they're doing, but a little more specific teaching and training on what to do to
All
handle
right.
those emotions.
All right. So that book was Zones of Regulation.
Yes,
All right.
by Leah M. Piper, I think it's Piper.
All right.
So, yeah.
And then I would ask you for like a trashy beach novel, but we got to save something for the next time you're on the podcast. So we'll leave that one go for there. Let's close up with this then, as far as a last question, last idea for you. Just if you've got a teacher who's out there who, let's say that they're going into going in education. Could be a young teacher, could be a veteran teacher who's looking for a switch or a change or whatnot, because you've had a chance to transition a few times back and
Hmm.
forth. What what advice would you give to a teacher who is a classroom teacher today who's thinking about possibly specializing, getting into a special education role, resource room role? Any advice you would give them on what they should consider, what questions they should ask, who they should talk to in terms of just sorting out, making a decision like that?
I think the advice I would give is first asking, as teachers, we all have different talents. And is one of your talents really being able to relate and build relationship with kids? Because the most important thing we can do as special educators, because we often have these kids for years, especially if you're in a parochial grade school, a lot of times you have those kids and that family for 8 years.
Mhm.
Are you a relationship builder? Because you're going to need that to really understand and to be that person that student can come to be like, I'm really struggling in this class, or this teacher isn't understanding. And, being able to teach them how to advocate for themselves, especially as they get older. But if you don't have that and that's not your talent, you're more like the one that can just really teach a good lesson. You can do that all you want in a special ed classroom, but it's not going to work unless they know you have their back and they believe, you believe in them. Um, so that's my first thing is like, are you a relationship builder? Like you need to have that because that's the most important part of our job. Because without it, we just can't make the progress we need without that relationship. Um, and then just also the other is, are you flexible? Because the only thing in special education that's the same is change. So even in that day, because you are going to be the last one to know, a teacher doesn't mean to forget to tell you that they had a field trip, but they had to let, the kitchen know, they had to let music know, they had to let, everyone know. And all of a sudden you go to pick them up and they're walking out the door and you're like, you know, um, are you flexible and adaptable? Because no day's the same. And there's a lot of times those kids come in and you have the best lesson planned and they're crying and you're like, well, that's out the door. So let's, this is what we got to do right now. So if you are like, it's this way and we cannot change, special education is not where you need to be. Um, so that would be my biggest advice is, are you ready to be flexible, ready to build relationships? And you are much more into families than when you're in the gen ed room. You get to do that a little bit, but you become a lot to that family because you've had their kid for so long. So ready for that. But I would also say too, making that change always like really motivates you and makes you a better teacher. Um, because you get out of that rut kind of that you can get into in education. And every time you make that change, you learn so much and it makes you grow and become better. So
Right. Excellent. Mindy, thank you so much. Appreciate you being able to take some time today. Hopefully, over the course of this last hour or so that we've been recording, you've been thinking about other LSEM types of things so that way you're not slacking. I'm sure you'll listen to this podcast a couple of times as you're driving to and fro the various
yes.
places where you're going. But no, in all sincerity, we're thrilled to have you in this role, and I know our principals and our teachers are enjoying getting a chance to meet you. And teachers listening to this, if you're going to be at LEA, Mindy will be there. She's going
Yes.
to a number of different conferences over the course of the fall here, but definitely reach out, connect. Lots of things that Mindy and all of us at LSEM are able and willing to provide to help make your schools better. So again, Mindy, thank you so very much for your time today and for your insights.
Well, thanks for having me. It was fun. And it's good to be back with LSEM. It really
Absolutely. And
is.
And thank you to everyone who took time to listen today. Do appreciate that. Remember to like, subscribe, share the link with other educators that you know. Again, check back to our archives. Lots of different topics, lots of good information shared over the last several years, and we'll continue to keep bringing that to you as well. But that's all for today. Thank you. My name again is Richard Schumacher, and thank you all for listening to the Lutheran Education Podcast, brought to you by Lutheran Special Education Ministries.
Thank you for listening. We'll meet you again in 2 weeks for the Lutheran Education Podcast. For more information about LSEM, go to our website at luthsped.org. You can follow us on X by going to www.x.com/LSEM1873 or on Facebook at facebook.com/LSEM1873. If you're on Instagram, you can find us by going to @LSEM1873. We'll meet you again in 2 weeks for the Lutheran Education Podcast. Did you enjoy today's podcast? Want to help get the word out? Please leave us a review on the app you're using to listen today.